The Apollo Justice Ace Attorney trilogy was released this past February, bringing the 4th, 5th, and 6th installments of the Ace Attorney series to home consoles and PC. And as someone who played these games on the 3DS when they came out, I can honestly say that this collection is the best way to play them. Not only did they upgrade the graphics, but they also added a ton of new features, including autoplay, achievements, and an animation studio complete with green screen. The meme potential is through the roof! However, not all the content from the original game survived through the chain of evidence custody. There are 2 DLC episodes that remain 3DS exclusive. And no, I'm not talking about the special episodes Turnabout Reclaimed or Turnabout Time Traveler. I instead refer to the Asinine Attorney episodes. Phoenix Wright Asinine Attorney and Apollo Justice Asinine Attorney were released as DLC for Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney Spirit of Justice. They also came with their own unique 3DS home menu themes. Man, I miss having those. Unlike the special episodes I mentioned earlier, these episodes are non-canon what-if stories. They don't fit with the timeline of the main story, nor are they meant to. They're just the characters we know and love doing comically stupid things purely for the fun of it. Unfortunately, the 3DS eShop shut down in 2023, so it's impossible to purchase DLC if you didn't own it already. And since these episodes were absent from both the mobile port and the Apollo Justice trilogy, they are officially lost media. If you'd like to see these episodes in full, I've uploaded some uncommented playthroughs to my archive channel that I'll link in the description. But for this video, I'll be providing the Cliff Notes version. Also, while I do recommend playing Spirit of Justice before watching, there won't be any spoilers beyond the episodes themselves. Phoenix Wright Asinine Attorney takes place in the Kingdom of Khurāin, the main location of the base game. Phoenix Wright and Pearl Fay are doing some sightseeing with Albie Urguide before meeting up with Maya Fay at the courtroom. But when they get there, court appears to be in session, with Miles Edgeworth at the prosecutor's bench and Phoenix apparently being the defense. Just then, a terrorist disguised as the court bailiff bursts in, demanding that Princess Rayfa be handed over to him. Rayfa is absent from the courtroom, so, in an attempt to stall for time, Pearl steps forward and claims that she is the princess. But then Albie, failing to catch on to her bluff, yells out, "Objection!"
Nuh-uh.
So the characters decide to hold a trial to determine Pearl's true identity. Cross-examining both Pearl and Albie simultaneously, Albie points out that she looks nothing like the real Rayfa, basing his claim on her guest appearance in The Bloom Punisher, in which she was at least 5'7" tall. But Phoenix presents a tabloid article listing Rayfa's height as 4'10", pointing out that she probably didn't play herself in that episode. However, Edgeworth points out that Pearl doesn't match that height either, nor does she resemble the photo provided with the article. Phoenix bluffs by saying that Rayfa was just a body double, but still needs a way to prove Pearl's royal lineage. That's when he remembers the Khurāinese monarchy is made exclusively of spirit mediums. Pearl is a medium herself, while Rayfa has yet to master the art of spirit channeling. Pearl channels the spirit of the judge's father, proving to the court that she is, in fact, the real Princess Rayfa, which the terrorist then declares good enough and starts to run off with her. Just then, the real Rayfa bursts in, apologizing for her tardiness. Turns out, the whole thing was an emergency response training drill that neither Phoenix nor Pearl were aware of. But the judge is still convinced that Rayfa is Pearl's body double, and the gallery refuses to listen to Phoenix's correction. Pearl goes on to rule Khurāin in Rayfa's stead, with a long and prosperous reign as queen, much to Rayfa's chagrin. Apollo Justice Asinine Attorney is set in the American courthouse, which is hosting a special event with trial reenactments. Rayfa is observing the proceedings, and Apollo Justice and Clavia Gavin have been tasked with showing her around, with Clavia getting paid for it, of course. Fascinated by the rather sport-like presentation of the event, Rayfa decides to stay in the States an extra day for sightseeing. But she needs approval from her father, Inga Kakul Khurāin, who isn't convinced that America has any decent tourist destinations. So Rayfa decides to hold a mock trial to prove him wrong. Reifa describes her dream destination to the court, which she saw on TV once but can't remember the name of. It apparently had a Japanese building with a multi-tailed creature in front, and also a flashy individual performing feats of wonder. Apollo suggests that these descriptions could refer to Ninetales Vale and Penrose Theatre, the central locations of the monstrous turnabout from Dual Destinies and the magical turnabout from Spirit of Justice, respectively. By video chatting with Athena and Trucy, who happen to be at those locations, he is able to examine them for evidence. Yes, they found a way to put investigations in the trial segment of the game. We even get some appearances from Jinxie Tenma and Miles Edgeworth. Unfortunately, Reifa is not satisfied with either location. The Yoko folklore of Ninetales Vale terrifies her, and she finds the very concept of magic tricks to be foreign and barbaric. Just as he's feeling cornered, Apollo gets an idea from the poster that Edgeworth dropped. Reifa's dream destination was Neo Old Tokyo, hometown of the Steel Samurai. Reifa confirms that the program she saw was a making-of documentary for the series, and she was enamored with the cast and crew's dedication to their craft. However, Clavia points out that since Reifa's dream destination is fictitious, she can't actually visit it. But Apollo manages to turn Reifa's frown around by pointing out how dedicated the citizens of Ninetales Vale and the staff at the Penrose Theatre are to their craft. The smiles they put on their customers' faces as they feast on cat's tails noodles or witness the wonder of Trucy's Magic Panties act. And how such hard workers exist all throughout the country. Moved by Apollo's speech, Reifa decides to go on a sightseeing spree with the entire courtroom the next day and pays for everyone's expenses. The episode ends with Edgeworth at the Penrose Theatre searching for his missing Steel Samurai poster. And that's all the Asinine Attorney episodes from Spirit of Justice. Thanks for watching, everyone.
Objection!
I beg your pardon, my dear Dr. Rank, but it would seem you've neglected to mention 2 more episodes from my game. Oh, did I, Mr. Sholmes? My apologies, I only realized after I'd started editing this video. The 3DS version of the Great Ace Attorney 2 Resolve had 2 Asinine Attorney episodes of its own, which for some reason were not included in the Great Ace Attorney Chronicles. And these ones are even more obscure because they've never been officially localized into English. And to make things even more complicated, they're not considered non-canon, they're semi-canon. So, since I'm talking about Lost Ace Attorney media, I may as well cover these 2 episodes. Spoilers ahead for the Great Ace Attorney 1. Asinine Attorney Japan takes place in between episodes 1 and 2 of the Great Ace Attorney Adventures, specifically on the 2nd of December. Just 10 days after Ryūnosuke Naruhodō is acquitted of the murder of John Wilson, prosecutor Takatsuchi Ouchi, Winston Payne's ancestor, files new charges, with Kazuma Asogi preparing to act as Ryūnosuke's attorney. But, having had no time to open the complaint letter, Kazuma fails to realize that the defendant is Kazuma himself. Ouchi has charged him with assault for having cut his top knot at the end of the trial, and seeks a 6-month prison sentence that would cancel his upcoming student exchange trip to England. Both Ryūnosuke and Detective Satoru Hosonaga testify, with Hosonaga having worked undercover as Ouchi's barber. Since the incident, he has allegedly been unable to tie his hair back up and restore his honorable top knot. Susato Mikotoba, who is acting as Kazuma's co-counsel, questions how his sword could have reached all the way across the courtroom. But Ryūnosuke mentions that Kazuma would often boast about his ability to slice up a watermelon from 7 meters away. Not exactly winning any points with the judge there. Upon examining the coyote hair tie that Ouchi was wearing at the time though, Kazuma realized that it only has a single clean cut. His sword only cut the hair tie, not the hair itself, and a fresh coyote from the bailiff confirms that Ouchi's top knot is still very much alive. But Ouchi isn't done yet and brings up a new complaint. An undercover investigation by Hosonaga revealed that foul play was involved with the selection process for the student exchange program. The appointed student was supposed to be the highest scorer across multiple exams, but according to the official leaderboard, Kazuma was only the runner-up. However, Kazuma recognizes the other names on that leaderboard. First place was Tadashi Sodenoshita, who had recently been arrested for bribery, and third place was Takatsuchi Ouchi. The only reason Ouchi would bring this up so close to Kazuma's departure was so that he could go to England himself. But Ouchi then reminds Kazuma of his first interaction with Giselle Brett during the previous trial. Despite having such high regard for Great Britain, Ouchi can't speak English. That's when Kazuma realizes the leaderboard has a typo. The name listed is Taketsuchi Ouchi, but it was supposed to say Takeshi Ouchi. Ouchi was just an entitled parent who thought his son should get to go to England, despite being 200 points behind. With his true motives exposed, Ouchi voluntarily allows Kazuma to cut his hair once more, and the judge declares a not guilty verdict. In the defendant lobby, Susato brings Kazuma the large suitcase he ordered, and after she leaves, he has Ryūnosuke try to fit inside it, setting up the events of episode 2. Asinine Attorney England takes place on an unspecified date sometime during the interval between the two Great Ace Attorney games. I couldn't find any English subtitles for this episode, so I had to make my own. Ryūnosuke is still on probation following the events of episode 5, but is apparently still allowed to act as co-counsel for Herlock Sholmes, who is apparently a licensed attorney? You know what? I'd play that game. Anyway, in this case, Baroque Van Zieks' favourite chalice, that he hasn't shattered in court, had been stolen from his office 3 days ago, and he's prosecuting Iris Wilson for its theft. Sholmes and Ryūnosuke act as her defense. Detective Tobias Gregson testifies that he saw Iris leaving Van Zieks' office on the day of the theft, carrying a paper bag large enough to fit the chalice in question. They struck up a conversation, and she gave him a full flask of her tea to drink. Sholmes presents this flask during the cross-examination, as the bag was probably containing the flask, not the chalice. Or at least that's the contradiction Ryūnosuke thinks of, but Sholmes' train of thought goes to a completely different station. How could Gregson have drunk the entire flask in one sitting? And why does Van Zieks never actually drink his wine in court? Sholmes convinces Van Zieks to take a sip right now, but he does a spit take that, I should note, is an entirely new animation. Why is there days-old tea in his wine bottle? Sholmes deduces that Gregson must have drank from one of Van Zieks' bottles and used the tea from the flask to replenish it, meaning Gregson was in the office and had an opportunity to steal the chalice himself. However, Gregson denies these allegations and claims that the only chalice he found there was black and corroded, hardly worth stealing in the first place. This statement reminds Ryūnosuke of his pocket watch, which was made of pure silver but had turned a tarnished black due to a chemical reaction with sulfur in some hot spring water. Apparently, 10 years ago, Van Zieks' silver chalice had met with a similar fate. One of his earliest defendants, a Mr. Maycare Musgrave, died in a construction accident shortly after his acquittal, marking the start of his reputation as the Reaper of the Bailey. And yes, for you Sherlock nerds out there, that name is a reference to the adventure of the Musgrave ritual. Musgrave's brother Devon then tried to poison Van Zieks, but he caught on at the last second and has used only transparent glass chalices ever since. But Gregson should have known about all this, considering how closely he and Van Zieks work. Sholmes asserts that when Gregson saw the blackened chalice on the chessboard, he reached for it involuntarily. It is at that moment that Ryūnosuke deduces the identity of the real thief, none other than Herlock Sholmes himself. Not once during the course of the trial had anyone mentioned the specific location of the chalice, so how did Sholmes know it was on the chessboard? Having just now remembered the events, Sholmes confesses. Apparently, he had been snooping around Van Zieks' office a week prior and poured himself a glass of wine into the chalice on a whim. Just before taking a sip, he noticed that the cup was stained black. Thinking the bottle had been poisoned, he poured the rest of it out the window, only realizing the age of the stain afterwards. Using his flask of Iris's tea, he replaced the bottle's contents and put it back on the shelf, where it would lie until coincidentally being brought to court that very day. He then took the chalice home with him to polish it, but Van Zieks didn't notice it was gone until a week later. Sholmes had even managed to lift the 10-year-old fingerprints from it and finally arrested Devin Musgrave on the morning of the trial. The judge is about to officially declare Iris not guilty, but Van Zieks instead decides to drop the charges altogether. He never specifies why, but the implication is that he wishes to spare her from the Reaper of the Bailey's curse. Iris then reveals what she was doing in Van Zieks' office in the first place. The day of the trial happened to be Van Zieks' birthday, and she had calculated the exact bottle that he would bring to court that day and planted a stuffed toy inside. Van Zieks is touched by the gesture, but doesn't exactly stick around for a group hug. Sholmes receives a £5 fine for breaking and entering, which for reference would be the equivalent of about 1,500 Australian dollars or 980 US dollars today. And, of course, he insists that Ryūnosuke pay for it. As you can tell, these episodes are absolute farces even by Ace Attorney standards. They don't try to take themselves too seriously, just telling a fun story for the sake of a fun story. It really is a shame that they're still 3DS exclusive. Hopefully Capcom decides to re-release these episodes eventually, but they've probably got more important things to do with their time.